So hey, what's up folks? How are you? A very happy weekend to all of you. Just enjoying some coffee here, some cold coffee, Cometeer coffee. Oh, hey, if you guys want some, I got an announcement with them coming up soon, so I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, I digress immediately. Chile is one of those teams that God knows what they're gonna do in this Copa America. It seems like they're kind of like floundering. And at the same time, it could be something good coming up, or it could be something bad coming up. I should say continuation of the bad coming up, because over the past 6-7 years, maybe more, actually getting closer to, well, more like 6-7 years now, Chile haven't been doing too well. That glorious run where they ended up winning the Copa America twice, had a great 2014 World Cup, had a very good 2010 World Cup. Well, that's a distant memory, a very distant memory, because the leaders are no longer long in the tooth. The leaders of that group are no longer long in the tooth. They are old. They are basically on their last legs. They've been on fumes for a long time, and they're waiting and expecting new protagonists to come in, new leaders to emerge, new stars to start to show their talent, new potential to kind of fulfill itself and become what they are supposed to become, or at least in the eyes of many, what they're supposed to become. That leads to the arrival of Ben Brereton. Ben Brereton Diaz, of course, who played over at with Sheffield United just recently, and in a season that was very, well, expected and yet disappointing, and quite the bummer for many. He was one of those few beacons of light for the Blades in that last half of the season, where he came from Villarreal, was able to come through, was able to emerge as one of their leading goal-scoring threats. And not only that, he helped in many occasions make this team look competitive, but the team was never able to emerge out of the bottom of the Premier League table. With all that being said, he's still looked at as a household name in Chile, because it's amazing how players like this, and this is basically going to be more the future. When you hear about certain countries being the future of football, well, this is going to be one of them. And there are many countries that are looking at players and examples such as Ben Brereton, Gianluca Lapadula, many of those that you hear that are coming to South America in particular. I give you more of a South American spin when it comes to this, that they start looking, and of course his arrival ends up being unique in and of itself. For those of you that aren't familiar with how Ben Brereton Diaz emerges as a player with the Chilean national team, born in England, played in England, was over at Blackburn Rovers, and someone ends up saying, hey, they look in Football Manager, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Football Manager, say Ben Brereton Diaz, Ben Brereton, first and foremost. And you see, English Chilean, well, that's interesting. Well, his mother's Chilean. And of course, they call the Chilean FA and they say, oh, whoa, look at this. Guy that plays at Blackburn Rovers, one of the leading school scorers in the championship. Look at what he's been able to do. Interesting. Let's check up on him. Of course, one thing leads to another. He ends up becoming interested. He ends up doing his paperwork. He ends up becoming, he does everything to be able to play for the Chilean national team, comes on board. People in Chile fall in love with him. He falls in love with Chile. And of course, he proudly represents Chile. There's no knocking that. But he hasn't been able to learn Spanish. Now, but what, and you hear this argument a lot in what it comes, in what many South America or many Latino circles, when you start expanding it more to Latin America or even the US, well, if just because you don't know the language doesn't mean that you don't have a sense of belonging. Yes and no. Yes, because you do assimilate the culture, you do assimilate the idiosyncrasies, you do assimilate a lot of things. But how can you assimilate better? How can you step into that culture, being distant from it, by not speaking the language? See what I'm saying? Now, I don't want to get into a conversation about this because that's not the actual point. The point is something else. The biggest controversy and the growth of the Chilean national team depends on it. Why is that? Because with the arrival of Ricardo Gareca to Chile, there are certain things that need to be analyzed in terms of why this is required of Ben Brereton Diaz. Wait, but he's playing well. Yes, or he's playing well enough. Yeah, he's played well over at Sheffield United. But there's a whole umbrella of circumstances and scenarios that end up emerging in all of this because the coach that is in charge has a certain managerial style. And without him understanding the language, it makes things very difficult. And here's where I might get a little professorial because obviously this is what I teach in a collegiate setting. We start talking about interpersonal communication and the impact of it on a football pitch. You see what I'm saying? There ends up being no, of course, when you create a link or a conversation between two people, you have the information that's being sent to you, but then also there's the feedback loop that emerges out of that. When there's no language, you have to deal. Hold on. This is going to look very sloppy. I don't care, but just so you get the point of what I'm trying to see, it needs to be a little bit, or I need to make it a little bit more visual so you understand where things are. Okay, give me a second. Well, let's do this. Hold on. Let's try and improvise a little bit here. I didn't have this expected. Let's see if this will work. Push this out, push this here, go out there. Is it properly framed? No, a little bit more. Let's do it like this. Let's rise it, make it go up a little bit more. Maybe that's what's gonna work, and it will. Okay? Okay. Player, coach, translator, okay? These are the two that need to understand each other, not me. Coach needs to give the information to the player. Player needs to understand it by letting him know whether it's the execution of or the explanation of. Okay? First and foremost. A good translator is never part of the conversation. A good translator, of course, I'm talking because if he speaks Spanish, he speaks English, there's a need for a translator. Okay? Let's not get things twisted. A good translator is never part of the conversation. Why is that? Okay, so let me switch. If the coach is telling something to the player, or the coach is telling something to the translator, what ends up happening? The coach ends up looking at me. Okay? What ends up happening here? Okay, yeah, I got it. Okay. Then they look at him. Then here. And then here. And then here. There's never this. The relationship never builds between these two. And that's where things end up getting very complicated when it comes to the implementation or the understanding of an idea. So when we start looking at it from that perspective, the only way these two can communicate is if I'm here. Nothing ends up ever developing between the two. It's always the intermediary. It's always the one in the middle. Ricardo Gareca's coaching style, or his managerial style, requires him to be this. Requires him to be more of this. He's not used to this. Is it wrong? No. I mean, it's not wrong. It's not right. It is what it is. But for him to have to go through someone else to express an idea when it's not only the idea, it's the idiosyncrasy of it, it's the understanding of the idea and knowing why he's doing it. He can, obviously, a coach like Ricardo Gareca is going to be able to explain it much better than I can. Okay? Gareca is going to give an idea, express the idea, have the player interpret the idea much, much better than I can. Okay? Reason why, if you go and see what Marcelo Bielsa was doing at one point when he had the translator at Leeds United, and this is where, of course, there's a bit of a difference between one and the other. The translator would go and say, hey, or the person, the coach or the would say to the player, or in the media and press conferences. Bielsa understood what was being said. He couldn't speak it properly, but he understood what was being said. So he said, no, that's not what I said. Gareca doesn't have that. But again, like I said, he's a more manager. He's one that wants to have a relationship. He needs to have the implementation of a relationship in order to give an idea better, in order for the player to have a better understanding of what he wants out of him. That's the reason why he said Ben Brereton has to speak Spanish. Ben Brereton has to go and understand that it's not me picking on him. It's me understanding, having a better channel of communication with him. And I think that's where many things get oversimplified when people start talking about, well, if Ben Brereton doesn't speak Spanish, doesn't speak Spanish, if Ben Brereton doesn't speak Spanish, I'm never going to call him up again. No, it's a combination of things. It's, if Ben Brereton doesn't speak Spanish, he can't implement the ideas I'm trying to bring across, because there's certain specific nuances that he wants to bring across. It's not just, hey, run this way. It's, this is what I want you to see. This is how I want you to analyze things. These are the scenarios. These are the moments. This is who, with A or B, this is what. So it's a whole lot of things, a lot of information that needs to be implemented that someone like myself might not be able to fully 100% understand. In a national team situation or a coaching situation, that needs to be understood 100% by the player. Not 85, not 80, not 90, 100%. And especially in a national team setting, where you have so few practices, so few sessions that you have with your team, that is required of you to absorb the information much quicker. Of course, for a coach to understand what a player does at his team that he can benefit from, and how that can be built upon using A, B, and C. So I hope that this is kind of an idea, as we can go back now and start talking a bit more about what this whole thing is all about. Seemed exhausting. It's not the fact that Ben doesn't speak Spanish, or Ben is not good enough because he doesn't speak Spanish. No, it's that he wants someone that he can express his ideas to, and they understand exactly what they want. Now, if they're executed poorly, regardless of the language, he's not going to play. Now, even with that limitation, we've seen what Ben's been able to do. Of course, we look at that friendly against France and we see how Chile has been slowly building up. Now, I don't know where they're going to end up in Copa. They have a good shot of qualifying into the second round. After that, it's anyone's guess. You could see Chile get to the semis. I don't see them getting into the finals, that's for sure. But if they go on a good run of form, they could get to semis, just the way the brackets are kind of working out. They could get knocked out in the first round too, so let's keep that very real as well. They play against Argentina. They play against Peru. That's probably the most pivotal game. And of course, they play against Canada. We'll see how that match against Canada ends up being, because technically that should be where all the South American sides gain points, whether it's 3 or 1, but they should all gain points out of Canada. But again, it's that. It's not just the simplification. I mean, I'm trying to simplify things, but also the communication of it all ends up being such a vital facet in all of this. This is what ends up being the most crucial part, because, like I said before, Gareca needs all of his players in a very short period of time to pick up a lot of information, to understand certain details, and that's why he's been so adamant about Brereton being able to speak in Spanish to him. Because also, if there's questions, who better to ask than the coach, right? Or the coaching staff. I mean, yeah, it's great to ask the translator, but then the translator can only do so much. It's beautiful to have, and like I said before, a good translator's never part of a conversation. A good translator's never part of the relationship. And that's what's trying to be built here. It's a friendship. I mean, I don't know if a friendship, but a relationship, and also a line of communication where any issues, any questions, anything that needs to be dealt with can be dealt in the best manner possible. Now, does it also mean that there's a sense of belonging? That too. Because then it just seems like, well, I'm wearing the jersey, I'm good, but that's it. I don't need to know the language. No, you need to. You need to, in order to play in a national team like Chile, in basically every national. Is it good to learn English? Of course it is. Would it be great for Gareca to know English? Yeah, it would be great for him to know English, but the job doesn't require it. And he doesn't need to learn a language to communicate with one person. Could he do it? Maybe he could. But then he's got so many other things, going on. Is that really his top priority when he has to deal with 26, 29 other players? That's the thing. So we'll see. We'll see how that relationship pans out, because it ends up being a dynamic that's very interesting, that ends up being very appealing, and also could end up being one of the compelling stories of the Copa America. So we'll check it out, okay? Guys, it's been a pleasure. Leave comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you disagree with what I'm saying, okay? Talk to you soon. Ciao.